Hi everyone, welcome to ArtsFest Online. This evening, artist Tom Hicks will be introducing a new project, Yam Cams Photography in the Black Country. Please use the Q&A box if you have any questions for Tom, and we'll go through them at the end of the talk. Just a quick reminder that this is a public platform and the session is being recorded, so please don't share any confidential information. Welcome Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Claire. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the project Yam Cams, and I'll introduce that in a while. Just like to say thanks to ArtsFest and the University of Wolverhampton for hosting the event. We'll remind you at the end, but ArtsFest has lots of regular online content and talks and discussions. So it's always free, as far as I know. So it's always worth having a look at ArtsFest online. So yeah, I'll just tell you a little bit about the project. So and I'm got a few of the things I'd like to share with you as well. So the project is called Yam Cams. It's been funded by Creative Black Country and their other support groups. And it's part of their Creative Communities project. So the initial idea really was to look at creative ways of working, obviously under COVID conditions, and particularly under the kind of restrictions that we're working under. And I know things are starting to open up again soon, but still a lot of life is still quite restricted. So this project's going to be hopefully accessible to lots of people in different conditions. But the background to it really is that Creative Black Country have funded this. So I'll tell you a little bit more as we go through. This is just an overview of what the session tonight will cover. So I'm going to talk about street photography and some background to how it kind of evolved, not in a really exhaustive way, just to kind of set the scene really. I'll talk a little bit about my own practice, so people, if you don't know who I am, you can start to look at the kind of work that I do. But I also really wanted to explore the Black Country in terms of how it's been documented and how people have taken photographs within the Black Country over a longer period, before going into the project itself and discussing how people can interact with Yam Cams as a creative project. Yeah, the main idea really is that it's accessible to everyone, and although this presentation will be talking about you know, professional photographers on the whole, or people with quite a lot of experience in photography, Yam Cams is basically aimed at anybody. So the only stipulation really was that if you've got a phone and you know how to email your images, you can start to become in part of the project. And we're accepting images from all walks of life, communities, individuals, but I'll explain that a little bit further as we walk through the project. So really what I wanted to do to begin with was just sort of talk about street photography in a broader sense. And obviously the image that you've got here is probably as far away from street photography as you could imagine. But really, street photography and urban photography really is an extension of landscape photography. So obviously when photography first developed, it wasn't much different to, I think it was seen really as in many ways, as a way of capturing landscape. So it could be then used for painters. So a lot of early photography was seen as a great way to capture a landscape so that a painter could reproduce it. But kind of as photography developed, a lot of time was spent on the kind of work that we've got here, and obviously it's a beautiful image, and it's of a wild landscape. but the kind of photography that we're going to be looking at really in terms of much of the Black Country is going to be an urban landscape. So although within it there are pockets of nature, I'd say on the whole we're going to be looking at urban environments. But this image really is what I would say is like people's kind of what they imagine when they think of landscape photography. But as things progressed, photographers started to kind of come into the city more. And obviously the different ways to look at that, cities are obviously a huge accumulation of people. But a lot of photographers used the camera to start to record images of the city, just as you'd record an image of like a mountain. So if we go back to this first one, obviously this is a natural form, but an image like this is actually just all the photographer is doing, in this case Stieglitz, is turning his eye to the urban environment. So this is kind of a fairly iconic photograph, and it's really documenting kind of the evolution of New York and the kind of urban environment. And any photographer who takes pictures of cities really has got this kind of imagery in their minds really. But I think what's kind of interesting in this piece, it's just it's mainly urban, but it's also talking about the relationship between nature and the built environment. And that's a theme through kind of my own work, but also lots of other photographers. So ultimately, anything that involves a street or a town or people is really still a landscape. So it's quite kind of interesting to think of it in those terms, really. I was just sharing this kind of image with you because it's kind of it's then a step ahead, a step forward in terms of how photography can kind of document life, but also the urban environment. And I think this is just a great kind of photograph, which kind of reflects the kind of chaos that you can see in cities and towns. There's a lot going on in this photograph. So even if you kind of ignore the people in it, you've got this landscape of signage, lettering, buildings in the background and nature, and then you've got these individual characters. And obviously the more you look at a photograph like this, you'll see that there's a kind of a great element of storytelling in this kind of photograph. And this obviously this is in the 70s, and it's in New York, but this kind of photography, anybody could do this in the present day. A lot of photographers who concentrate on urban photography include people as well. So I think this is kind of just like really now moving from landscape into cities, into people. And I think it's kind of, not only is it documenting, New York itself, but also the people of New York. And really as a project, that's what Yam Cams is about. It'll be really about people, and kind of what people are up to in the Black Country, and maybe a cross section of the whole of the region. There are 4 boroughs in the Black Country, and each of those have got their own character, but also the towns within them are really different. So we're hoping that the project will get images sent across the board and some really interesting stuff. This one is, I've included this and the next slide really are about, although there's no people in this particular photograph, it's about the impact of people on the landscape. So Stephen Shaw, he did most of his photography was in America, and it's about really the way America sprawls. So it's, you know, it's a vast area. You know, it's urban, but also things are plonked in the middle of nowhere. So this is in Texas. So this is just a drive-through cinema. But basically, what he's documenting is just the building itself. So for a lot of people, it's kind of it's just a nice image to look at, but also it's of its time, and it also reflects the kind of almost like the passing of time, really, because this obviously when this was first painted, it would have been really bright and fresh, but by the time Stephen Shaw got there, it was a little bit down on its luck. There's not much detail about the films that you can watch at this drive-in, so to me, it could be that it's actually derelict cinema now. But a photographer like Stephen Shaw, what he's one of his main projects was called American Surfaces, and it was really about buildings, old signs, you know, broken down cars. That kind of subject matter really was the kind of focus of his work. Obviously, in America, he's got a lot of scope. It's such a vast place, but again, the Black Country has got loads of this kind of not on this scale maybe, but there's a lot of if you want to just take photographs of buildings, it's perfect because it's a huge area and there's a lot of variety. But I'll just move forward to the next slide. These two artists, Burton and Hillebecker, I think this is really relevant to the kind of area that we live in. Although industry in the Black Country is kind of sort of almost in its decline, really, there are still lots of features around that are kind of remnants of industry. So I thought this is kind of like a nice example of how photography can work in different ways. So these are blast furnaces, as the title suggests, and they're taken over a different time period, so from the 60s to the 90s. But what Burton and Hillebecker did was they went to industrial areas around the world, but mainly in Europe and the UK, and took photographs of the same kind of function and the same kind of objects. So these are all blast furnaces, but they're not all in one place. These are in different parts of Europe, the UK, and beyond. But what they're doing is talking about sort of, obviously there's a variation of design here, but also the impact of industry on an area. And again, where we live, even if you live in an area where there was a factory, but it's no longer working, I think there's something really interesting about the remnants of that factory. So again, that's something I'd be interested in. Other people might just like the way it looks against a hill or whatever, but the project really is kind of multifunctional in terms of the fact that we're trying to like take photographs from different perspectives. But I always liked their work because it's large scale. They always use black and white really, but it just shows that although these are unusual objects, you can get them in different parts of the landscape as well. And these two images really, although they're very different subject matter, they're still about how man and human activity have had an impact on the landscape. So it's great that they're documented, because for all we know, this particular building's been demolished now, and you can guarantee that half of these furnaces no longer work, because blast furnaces, they're not used that often now. There's obviously technology's moved on. They were coal fired, so coal isn't really a clean fuel anymore. So a lot of these will have been gone and probably been melted down or become washing machines or something like that. So But what I'm trying to put across really is the kind of variety of images that people can have a look at. Just going to talk a little bit about my own practice. So if people don't know my approach, I'll show you a few images of my work. So most of my photographs are taken when I'm out on my bike or walking around. The main theme is the Black Country. So as you'll see from these images, they're taken in different places in the Black Country. And again, they're mainly of places like buildings or signage or unusual kind of aspects of the Black Country. But ultimately, they still boil down to people and human activity. So although this building hasn't got any people walking past, or there's not even a car parked outside it, you can see what it's about and what it used to be. The front door kind of suggests that it's no longer used. And what I've heard last week was this particular part of the building's now been demolished. So it looks like the building hasn't got long left. So maybe it was useful that I took a photograph of this particular image. But this kind of image works on lots of levels. It could be about, recording the history of life, or you might just like the colours. And really both of those reasons are valid for taking a photograph. So it doesn't have to be a big reason. Sometimes it's just something that makes you laugh. So yeah, my overall practice involves working my way through the Black Country. I tend to pick a sunny day if possible, because that for me alters the way that things look, often for the better, but it also highlights the surfaces of things quite well. But again, there's a variation even within my own work, and obviously as individuals, if you're taking photographs, you'll have a real range of stuff that you'll be interested in taking pictures of. And as a project, we're looking for all kinds of submissions, really. This particular shot is in Pensnet. It's in front of a building that was being constructed, but what happened was I just went past on my bike and I saw the shadow against the wood and got a little bit nearer, took a photograph, and then moved on to my next location, really. And I think the good thing about digital photography is that you can look at the end of the day and work through your images, see which ones make sense. For me, some days I'll take photographs and I might only have one or two that I think are worth using anywhere. But sometimes you get the odd photograph you think, oh, that's really good. So it just depends on the weather, really, and maybe your mood even. This one, again, it's an example of a roadside kind of feature. The red and white section of this is a shipping container. It's just been painted in a really bright colour, and these kind of elaborate chairs in front of it, as far as I know, have probably been thrown out. What this is a car wash. So the people who run the car wash use this to store all their stuff and maybe hang out. It was kind of a hot day when I took that. This previous image, although it looks quite kind of a nice day, it was in the middle of winter. So often the sun gives you a false impression of what the weather was like and how warm it was, but this was a kind of a hot day. Again, I've been past this quite recently, and everything's gone and it's been painted black. So I think the car wash has probably moved on, and it's a bit, I think there's something interesting about that as well, the fact that these places have a change in use quite quickly. And a lot of the photographs I take are of buildings which are at risk or have just been demolished. So I've got quite a few photographs where it's areas of the Black Country that are being altered. Again, there's value in that as well, I think. This next section of the talk, really, I thought it'd be really nice to talk about people who've not only photographed the Black Country, but also spent time here and you know, worked here in different capacities, really. Because I think any area that you look at, you'll have photographers who kind of arrive in the area, maybe take a few photographs, do a project that's quite small, and then move on. And like an example of that is Martin Parr. He did a few projects in the Black Country, and they're great and they're really colourful, and they give a good kind of quick overview of the region. But I thought for this particular project and this session, I'd like to show you a few images from people who spent a considerable time here for different reasons. But again, they'll hopefully show the kind of variation in approaches as well. A couple of the people I'll be speaking to have links to the university as well, and I'll explain that in a bit, because I think that's kind of nice that ArtsFest are hosting this, because these people actually worked at the university as well, a few of them anyway. So the first person I'd like to just have a quick look at really is Nick Hedges. Nick spent time in factories in the Black Country, and you can obviously tell from the date that the factories were still quite thriving in the mid to late 70s in this area, although decline was about to kick in terms of industry across the Black Country, particularly in the early 80s. But Nick Hedges spent time within the factories, so he didn't just kind of walk past and take a few photographs. He had proper access to a range of factories in the area. So some of those were like lock factories in Willenhall, but also he spent a lot of time at British Steel, particularly their Bilston plant. So although we know from this detail that this is in Bilston and it's late 70s, this could be you know, somewhere in Russia or the Eastern Bloc. It's kind of a really dramatic photograph, and I think it's just a nice study of kind of the Black Country in a nutshell, really. Again, this was Bilston Steelworks, which is no longer there. And what I like about this and lots of his other work is he portrays the humour of the people as well. So these two guys are obviously having a bit of a break from work. The conditions there were really hot. So as you can imagine, if you're melting steel, then you have to have kind of hot conditions. Seems a bit obvious, but I know that a lot of these foundries would have their own pubs within them, because they let the workers have a drink, because it was that hot. The work was so boiling hot there that they had a real thirst on. And in those days, it was seen as perfectly acceptable to let the workers have a drink while they're at work. Not sure whether that's related to this photograph. I think it's probably just having a break. But what I liked about his work, and at the end of this presentation, I've got some links so people can have a look at the photographer's work in a bit more detail. But what I really liked was the fact you could tell that he spent time there, and he was, considered part of the factory for a while, I'd imagine. But Nick Hedges used to teach photography at the university. He was head of photography, but also he did a lot of work for Shelter, the homeless charity, and lots of magazine work throughout that period. So he's definitely worth having a look at if you've not seen his work before. The next photographer I thought I'd like to highlight in terms of portraying the Black Country is John Myers. Again, John worked at the University of Wolverhampton. He was a lecturer in painting, and I think he was probably at one point more well known for his painting and his knowledge of painting and his career as a lecturer in that subject than he was as a photographer. But John created a series of images of Stourbridge, Craigley Heath, Kingswinford, and the surrounding areas around this kind of early 70s period, early to late 70s. And they kind of document new housing things. So when new housing estates went up, he'd go around with his camera and take photographs of them. But he also did a lot around the people of the Black Country as well. So he does some great portraits. So I think I'll just quickly show you an example of one of his works. And obviously they're of their time. So not only are they great photographs, but they also kind of document the fashions of the time, the tastes, but ultimately the people. And I think he's got a great eye for taking pictures of people. And I think what's interesting about photography is you don't always think of it in terms of keeping a record, but obviously our taste now, everyone's got their own sofa and they might have their own big TV, or they might have a computer games console on display. At the moment, they look quite contemporary, but if you keep a photograph and then reproduce it in 20 or 30 years' time, or in this case, nearly 50 years' time, they become something else and they become a document. And really, as well as photographing people and landscapes, these are all examples of documents. And we're hoping really that the Yam Cams project, although it's got a really humorous side and we just want to see what people are up to, we're hoping that there'll be an element of this kind of documenting people. So John Myers worked in the Black Country. Again, he taught in the Black Country and over a sustained period of time, which I think is really interesting. And I think it makes a difference, as I said, than people just visiting and getting sort of an impression of the place. These photographers knew the place really. I think that's the difference. Just thought I'd move on a little bit in terms of time periods. People might be aware of Rob Clayton's work, but he did some really nice colour photographs in the early 90s, and he did a big project just based on the Lion Farm estate in Albury. So again, what we've got here is landscape photography, but obviously what we've got then is the impact of people and city planning, tower blocks. In this area, we've still got some big estates with tower blocks, but as the kind of example of Netherton shows, that a lot of the tower blocks are now being removed. So they were considered the future of housing, and now they're seen almost as the past, really. But what I like about this is it shows, again, everyday life. Rob Clayton took these photographs as part of his degree. He studied photography at Wolverhampton as well. But these were seen as part of a project for his degree. Again, it captures people, not only the buildings, but people. And also there's quite a nice sense of humour about them as well. What he's done since this is he's gone back and done another series. So he's gone back to the estate and taken some images of it as it is now. But I think there's something great about the fact that he's of the area as well. And that's the difference between this and other projects. It's very focused on the Black Country, and we want it to be by the people of the Black Country, really. So yeah, again, I've got Rob's email website address, which I'll display at the end, so you can have a look at it. So the next person, before we move a little bit further on, this is Richard Billinger. He's got an international reputation for his work. Again, he started in a different way, probably similar to John Myers. He was a painter, so he was studying painting at Bourneville College, but he was born and brought up in the Black Country, in particular Cradley Heath. So how these images came about really was that he wanted some subject matter for his paintings. So he was going to use these to base his photographs on. It's quite an extreme photograph. If you do like animals, it's probably quite upsetting. I don't think the cat had much say in this particular scenario, but the imagery really is taken of his home life. And although he kind of does occasionally apologise for the content, this is just how he lived. So he took these photographs and was going to use them as the basis for paintings. But what happened was that his tutors started to see the photographs and thought there's more to them than just being used as the basis of a painting. And they actually became quite celebrated, and the Saatchi gallery bought them. And he's got now an international profile for his work. So he did these series of photographs in his parents' flat in Cradley Heath. He also did another series which were more of the landscape of the Black Country. Again, this is quite, for some people, it's quite an unremarkable photograph, but for people who know the area, you know that this is typical of the Black Country. You know, it's fairly mixed in terms of the terrain. The whole areas that don't seem to have any planning laws. So, you know, people just put up buildings where they feel like it. Whereas some areas of the Black Country, if you want to put a new porch on your house, it can take 6 months to get permission. So it's in terms of a landscape, it's a really kind of unusual place. So Richard Billinger did these. He did a series of night shots as well. So he went across the Black Country at night, and obviously it's a different place under street lights. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you that kind of landscape kind of work that he does as well. But he's since had a film made of his work. So it just shows you that the kind of images that you start out with can then transform and become something else. So he went from being a painter to being more well known as a photographer, and now he's a filmmaker. So I think it just shows you the kind of range of that particular person's work. So before moving on, I just wanted to talk about really the reason for showing you that work, and it's really to demonstrate that, you know, there are different ways to look at the same region. Just in that group of photographs, we've got industry, people, streets, groups of people, and just scenery. As a project, Yam Cams isn't expecting a particular style of photography, and we definitely don't expect expert photographers to be sending their work in. Obviously, we'd be happy for them to do that, but the idea is that anybody can send stuff in. We're just interested to see what people come up with. I'll talk a little bit about the project now, just so you can see how you can get involved. And then towards the end of this, we'll have a bit of time for some questions about how we see the project, really. So really the idea of it is that anybody can send a photograph into it. I personally still use a phone camera. So all of my images is taken on my phone, which I find really handy, particularly if I'm on my bike. I can just put it in my pocket and take it out. And when we spoke to Creative Black Country and put the description of the project together, that was key to it really, that people can use their mobile phones. We're still under lockdown really. I mean, I know that things are going to be starting open, and the pubs are going to be quite busy on Monday, I'd imagine. But on the whole, most people are either going out to exercise or maybe just going for a walk. And on the whole, people tend to have a smartphone with them. So that's the whole kind of ethos of the project. People can send images taken on a camera, that's fine, as long as they're digital. But the main idea is that you just take photographs when you're out and about. It's not a competition, so it's not about who can do the best stage photograph or photograph the most interesting stuff. As you've seen from mine, I take pictures of quite bland things sometimes. So it's what it means to you really. And as a project, we just be really fascinated to see what people send in. As this says here, any genres welcome. And it doesn't have to be a case of people going out and taking photographs just for a reason. You might have a community group that you're involved in and you make things, or you know, you might be involved in a football team and you think there's some funny images that happened at, you know, during a match, or it can be anything really. Talking to Creative Black Country, we've kind of realised the huge range of groups out there as well. So we're welcoming photographs from anybody and any kind of walk of life really. So what we're going to ask people to do is send the images through, as well as having a gallery of work. So we're going to have an Instagram account which displays everybody's photographs. Ultimately, after the project's finished, we're going to have a book of the project, and that will be a publication that we'll put together, and it'll be sort of highlights from the project. And the aim is really that if somebody has a photograph reproduced in the book, then we'll send you a free copy of the book. We're looking at different formats for the book. Obviously you can have photo books, can be quite slim. They could be 24 pages long, or if it's a big project and we get a lot of interest, it might be a more substantial publication. But the overall aim is that at the end of the project, we'll be able to produce a record of the project, which we'll be also sending to places like libraries and archives across the borough, each borough, sorry, because I think what we can do is say this is a record of the Black Country in this year, in this time period, and hopefully if people have their own copies, they can keep them. But libraries and archives are great because they'll keep a copy of it and look after it. Whereas I know that if you get given a small book, it can end up down the back of the sofa or whatever. I've touched upon this really, but mobile phones really are perfect for this because you can take your images, you can look at them in your own time. If you've got some software on the phone which normally comes with it, you can edit them till you're happy, and then you can send them through. You know, the classic thing that people think of with photography is, oh, it needs to be black and white, it needs to be perfectly shot. That kind of photography really is more fine art photography, and that's not really what we're interested in. We're interested in a range of images from a range of people. So in terms of sending stuff through, the main focus of the project's the Instagram account, and that's the Yam Cams. So if you've got Instagram, if you just look that up, hopefully some of you will have seen it because that's how we've been kind of advertising a lot of it. but the other way to get involved is just to email the yamcams@gmail.com. And what we've got now is a group of people who are on the project working with each borough. So after the launch today, we're going to be going out to community groups across the 4 boroughs in the Black Country. We'll be working with Creative Black Country and their advisors in terms of linking to projects and other activities across the area. So I think it'll start out in one way, but we don't know where it's going to go. But it's quite exciting to work out where it will go. The only thing I'll say about sending emails is if it's a large file, you might need to look at using something like WeTransfer, which creates a link. So our email account doesn't get kind of bombarded with massive files, but we'll have all the instructions of how to submit images on the Instagram account, so people can have a look at that. Just this end bit, really, this will give you the links to the different artists that we've looked at today. I think it's worth exploring these people just to have a look at. Someone like, for example, John Myers, there's a real humour to his work. Same with Nick Hedges, really, and all of these people that have got different ways of looking at the region that we live in, really. And I think it'd be nice to have a look at these people after the event if you've got 5 minutes. ArtsFest always records their sessions, so you have the pleasure of being able to see me talk again if you want. Once might be enough, but obviously you'll have the chance to write all this down if you haven't taken a note of people's names. So yeah, what I'll do now is let Claire have a look at the questions and we can see if there's any kind of queries that have come in.
Yeah, there are a few questions, Tom. So this one from James asks, is there a restriction on format and classification, such as AVs, triptychs, monocolor sizes, etc.?
No, I mean, the only thing we'd say is the size of the file will make a difference. So if people could use WeTransfer, that'd be perfect. So if you don't know what it is, WeTransfer is a free website where you can load your images up and it creates a link. That means we open the link and then we open your images on our computer, so it doesn't swamp our email. But in terms of layouts and formats and how people want things to look, if you drop some notes into your email, we're happy to look at different layouts and multiple. Instagram gives you the chance to swipe, so we could do like a swipe where people can work through their images. But yeah.
So black and white or colour,
yeah.
or okay, yeah. Great.
A lot of people like, at the moment, there's a big trend for people to use film and then rescan it. So they'll start off with a vintage film and then digitize it and send it, and that's all acceptable as long as we get a digital file.
Okay, sorry, I think I lost you there. Okay, a couple of questions asking, is there a limit to the number of photographs you can send? But I think you've probably just...
Yeah, no, just send as many as you like in, yeah.
Okay. How long will the project run for?
At the moment, we're looking at 2 months, so April, obviously we're into April, heading towards the end of May. And then around the end of May, we'll start to assemble a book. So if people have got a couple of months to send stuff through, which should be plenty of time, I think, for people to send stuff through. And you could do it more than once if you like the results and you like kind of seeing what you've sent through. Yeah.
Okay. A question here asks, can we edit the pictures?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the image as you took it. You can prepare it before you send it. Okay. Most people will do that because not many people take an image straight away. It's perfect. So yeah, take your time, edit it. We'll display it as close to the original as we can. Instagram sometimes has a, you know, if it's a portrait picture, it'll squash it off, but we normally we'll post it so it'll be reproduced in full when you click on it. So, yeah.
Okay. If including people in the photos, do we need to ask permission to take their photograph?
I think if it's taken directly off people, it's worth approaching them.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, if you point your camera at an individual in a street, that I think it is worth having a chat to them, saying, do you mind if I take your photograph? I think that's courtesy, really. Scenes like the images in Brooklyn, Broadway in New York, where it was a street scene and there's lots of people, you don't actually need permission to take pictures of a street scene. If it's an image of a crowd or a scene of people, you don't have to then go to each person and say, can I use this photograph? I don't personally take pictures of people I don't know, but if you think you need to ask their permission, it's probably a good idea to do that.
Okay.
If you feel a bit uncomfortable about it, generally people don't mind if you just have a chat to them.
Yeah, perhaps tell them about the project. I mean,
Yeah, but I do know a lot of people walk through towns with a camera and just do random shots. And if it's not kind of exploiting them, or not a kind of a direct picture of one person looking at you, I think it becomes a street scene, and that's where you know, it's acceptable, really.
Okay. Thanks for that question. So we've got another one here. Can it be my local area?
Yeah, definitely. We're interested in areas that perhaps have never been really studied or photographed before. I've been talking to the advisors at Creative Black Country, and there's loads of areas I've never even heard of. So that's part of it, really, is to get some exposure to your local area. I think the thing we talked about to Creative Black Country was when we came up with the idea that because a lot of us haven't got the ability to go to the beach and take photographs of lovely sunsets, or go to, you know, the Lake District and take pictures of hills and mountains, why not turn your attention to your local area? So, you know, start with the street you live in, or even, you know, your back garden if you want. Because, you know, although you live there, or you'll know the estate that you live in, a lot of people have never seen where you are. So definitely a local focus is perfect.
Okay. Can photos taken over the past 12 months during the pandemic be sent, or does it need to be photos taken from now?
Yeah, any time period. The other thing we talked about as part of this was the idea of maybe if someone's got like a collection of older photographs, you might want to send some in. And that could be like of West Bromwich 20 years ago. If they've never seen the light of day, then our project have been interested in that as well. So as long as it's a photograph and it was taken in the Black Country, it's legit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that kind of answers Maria's question. Can we send pictures of anything, or just the street and buildings?
No, it can be anything. There's lots of community groups in this area, and lots of people are interested in different things. So people are, you know, might be interested in model making, or remote control cars, or people really love cars in this area. So doing up cars and repairing them or showing them off, cycling clubs, anything like that, anything that reflects the area. We'd be more than happy to have a look at it.
Okay. Don't think there's any more questions, Tom. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, I think the main thing is that we've got different ways for people to communicate with us. We've got the email, there's Instagram, there's a Twitter, which is the Yam Cams, believe it or not. So we've got a Twitter account. But if people have got any queries throughout it, they can start to send suggestions through, or questions or queries. Yeah.
Okay. One's just come through, if you're all right to answer that.
Yeah.
How about an AV slideshow with music for a presentation night?
Also like to follow it up.
Mm. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked about is having like an exhibition, or like that suggestion, just having an old school slideshow.
Yeah, it'd be really nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think an exhibition would be ideal. We kind of worked it when the project came about. We were still working under lockdown, so galleries were shut. But what we'll do is keep digital copies of all the images, and then that will give us the scope to move forward with it. So Creative Black Country have already said that, you know, if there's enough imagery, there may be scope for other aspects to the project. So I think you know, a night where we show the work would be good.
Yeah, it'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just one other question, Tom. Can children submit photos?
Yeah, I think they could. I mean, as long as the parent okays it, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because you know, you might have some budding photographers or really talented people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have got the ability to take photographs, and they perhaps don't really do anything with the images. Yeah, that's how I started. Really, I used to take kind of photographs and not really have anywhere to go with them. And then when I heard about Instagram, it became a place to put stuff. It just so happened that people liked it. So you never know who's out there and what people are doing. And there's so many different ways of looking at the world, and areas of the Black Country, or maybe features. There's people who take pictures of, you know, just really random things, but it makes sense. Like I know one person who takes a picture of the corners of factories, you know, just like where rubbish accumulates. But because they're all different, it becomes a series of photographs, and it's quite funny. So yeah, but children, I definitely think kids have got a great way of looking at the world as well. So yeah, just get the parents to help them. Well, they probably know more than the parents, to be honest, in terms of sending them in. But if they just keep an eye on what's sent through, and then we'll be fine with that. That's fine.
Okay. There's a question here from Jennifer. I live on the borders of the Black Country. Is it still okay for me to take photos?
What do they mean by the border?
Well, the border is questionable anyway, isn't it?
The thing with the Black Country is nobody really knows where it is anyway. There's no like agreed map of where it is. If they're talking about living on the edge of the countryside and the Black Country, that's perfect. Because really, the Black Country was countryside before industry started. So you know, that's perfect. If you mean on the border of Birmingham and the Black Country, you might want to just head back into the Black Country. Birmingham's big enough for itself. It's got its own thing going on. But yeah, that's fine. The edges of the Black Country are really interesting, I think. And you can argue that parts of the Black Country are actually in different parts of the country. So I don't know, places like Breen in Wales, that's just basically the Black Country. Aberystwyth used to have the Express and Star delivered. Do you know what I mean? Stourport's not really in the Black Country, but it's actually just basically the Black Country, isn't it? Kimber, you know, when you go there, it's full of people from the Black Country trying to get some fresh air.
Well, we've got some comments here. You know, excited to see how this project unfolds. Thanks to all involved for organising. So lots of thank yous there. I think, you know, it's really got legs, hasn't it?
Hopefully, yeah. I think what will be really interesting is when we start to work in the boroughs. So for each borough, we've got a person who's going to go out and start to make contact with people, and that's where you can start to develop more in-depth links with like community groups.
Yeah.
Schools are perfect because, you know, most schools have an art department, and if they want to do like a little project and see their students' work appear somewhere else, it's perfect. Colleges, anywhere where there's like a visual content, even if it was like taking photographs of their artwork for their GCSE or something, You know, we're not reflecting just what the photographs depicting. It's like the culture of where it was taken and what it was about.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's different ways to look at a photograph, which is what makes it so kind of interesting, I think.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I think.
And it's accessible. You know, years ago you'd need to be able to buy a camera, pay for the processing, you know, and all that. But really, most people have got a really powerful phone in their pocket now, and you can have endless amounts of images. If you don't like it, you can go back the next day and have another go, and you can see it on the spot as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see what comes through.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see.
Yeah.
So that concludes the questions. Again, just lots of thank yous coming in. Yeah.
Great.
Anything else you want to add, Tom, before we go?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Claire, for hosting it, and
Pleasure.
ArtsFest.
Pleasure.
Obviously to Creative Black Country for getting behind it. They've got loads of other projects on the go. I'll be kind of linking Yam Cams to that. Lots of different projects. So, you know, if they're taking, they might not be photography related, but if they're taking images, I'd like to share what they're doing as well. So we're all helping each other out. I think it's about making the area, you know, what it is really. It's a creative area. It's just the Black Country doesn't tend to shout about it very often. We just get on with what we're doing. So
yeah, we're very good at not shouting about what we do, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's great timing, isn't it? As we're kind of moving out of lockdown, and it seems like a really, really well timed sort of project, doesn't it? It's something positive to get involved in.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully people will start to get out and about more now.
Yeah.
When things start to open up, you know, you can take your phone with you and see your friends, or maybe document the first time you get together again and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Tom. What an exciting opportunity. Hope you're all going to be snapping away and sending in some great stuff. I think the images that you showed us were really interesting too. So our next ArtsFest online event will be on Wednesday, the 14th of April, and it's a fashion and textile symposium with talks from 3 industry experts. So that'll be really interesting. You can book for free through Eventbrite, and we hope to see you all there. Thanks for watching. Bye.
See ya.